The chapel was draped in silence as mourners gathered to say their final goodbyes. But then, without warning, a German shepherd started barking at the closed casket. At first, everyone assumed it was just the pain of loss. But the barking grew more urgent, more desperate, until it became impossible to ignore. What that faithful dog was desperately trying to tell them would reveal something so extraordinary that every person in that room would be left shaking and in tears. They had come to honor Officer Daniel Granger, a man who wore his badge with pride, a husband who loved deeply, and a partner to one extraordinary German shepherd named Rex. Rex sat near the casket, his police vest still strapped across his chest. But he wasn't sitting quietly the way everyone expected. A soft whimper escaped his throat, followed by a single bark. People glanced over briefly, then looked away. They figured he was confused, maybe grieving in the only way a dog knows how. But then everything changed. Rex rose to his feet, ears sharp and alert, his entire focus locked on the casket in front of him. His tail went rigid. A low growl rolled up from somewhere deep in his chest. And then he started barking. But relentless. The sound cut through the stillness like an alarm no one wanted to hear. Heads turned. Whispers began spreading through the rows of mourners. An officer sitting near the front stood and walked over, gently trying to pull Rex back. But the dog refused to move. Instead, he lunged forward, his claws scraping against the polished wood of the casket. Something was wrong. The widow lifted her head, her eyes wide with confusion. Rex had never acted like this before. This wasn't just grief. This was something else entirely. The barking continued. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure of what to do or say. Some thought the moment had simply become too much for the dog. Others wondered if Rex was reacting to the loss in his own broken way. But a few of the veteran officers in the room, men and women who had spent years working alongside trained dogs, recognized something familiar in Rex's behavior. This wasn't confusion. It wasn't panic. It was focus. Pure, undeniable focus. The kind of intensity a working dog only shows when he's locked onto something important. One of Daniel's closest friends, an officer named Bryant, stood up and made his way to the front. He knelt down beside Rex and placed a steady hand on the dog's neck. "Easy boy," he said softly. But Rex didn't calm down. He didn't back away. He barked again, louder this time, his nose pointed directly at the base of the casket. Then his behavior shifted. He stopped barking and started circling the casket, sniffing along the edges, whining, returning again and again to the same spot. He paused there, tapping his paw against the wood. And that's when Bryant heard it. A sound so faint he almost missed it. A tiny, muffled cry coming from inside the casket. His face went pale. He turned to the funeral director standing near the back of the room. "Open it," he said urgently. A wave of gasps rippled through the mourners. The director stammered something about procedure, about respect, but Bryant's voice cut through the hesitation. "Open the casket." Rex growled again, pressing his nose against the lid as if willing it to open. The room fell completely silent as the director approached and slowly, carefully, lifted the lid. And there, tucked beneath Daniel's folded hands, hidden in the folds of his uniform, was a tiny newborn puppy. Alive. Breathing. Moving. No one spoke. The air felt too thick to breathe. Every eye in that room locked onto the fragile little creature nestled against Daniel's chest. The puppy was trembling, no older than a few days, its fur still damp, its tiny nose searching blindly for warmth. Rex let out a soft whimper, his tail wagging cautiously as he peered into the casket. His entire posture had changed. No longer frantic. Now protective. Almost gentle. "How is this possible?" Someone whispered from the back. The priest made the sign of the cross, his hands trembling. "Is this some kind of sign?" But Officer Bryant, his own hands shaking, leaned forward and carefully lifted the fragile puppy from the casket. As he did, something slipped out from beneath Daniel's jacket. A folded piece of paper. Bryant picked it up, his heart pounding. On the outside, in Daniel's handwriting, were just a few words. "If anything happens to me, please take care of them." "Them," Bryant repeated out loud, his voice cracking. Another wave of gasps filled the room. Rex, still standing guard, gently nuzzled the tiny puppy and let out a single bark. Not a warning. Not an alarm. A confirmation. He hadn't been reacting to grief at all. He had been trying to protect the puppy the entire time. Daniel hadn't just trained Rex to follow orders. He had entrusted him with something far more precious. A promise that stretched beyond death itself. And Rex had kept that promise, leading everyone to a miracle no one would have believed if they hadn't seen it with their own eyes. Tears began to fall. But this time, they weren't just tears of sorrow. They were tears of wonder. If this story touches your heart, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that hope still exists. As the mourners slowly gathered closer, Officer Bryant unfolded the note with trembling fingers. The room had gone completely still. No more whispers. No more shuffling. Every single person turned toward the worn piece of paper Daniel had left behind, as if it held the answer to a mystery none of them could understand. The letter began with simple words. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it home. A sob broke the silence. Even the priest stepped back, stunned by Daniel's foresight. But if Rex is still with you, and if by some miracle she made it too, then please know this wasn't an accident. I knew she was coming. I kept it a secret because I didn't want anyone to worry or try to stop me. Rex and I, well, we've been through things most people can't imagine. But we always understood each other. Bryant paused, his voice breaking, then continued reading. She was born the night I went missing. In the cold. Alone. Rex didn't leave my side, not even when he could have run for help. He stayed. He guarded. And when I closed my eyes for the last time, I only hoped that someone would hear him bark. The crowd broke. People covered their faces, shoulders shaking. The mystery had finally been solved. The barking wasn't grief. It was a final message. A cry for help. A guardian's alarm. Daniel's last mission hadn't been about saving himself. It had been about protecting a life he barely had time to meet. And Rex had made sure that life wasn't forgotten. Later that evening, as the sun began to set beyond the hills, the tiny puppy lay wrapped in a soft blanket inside the precinct's canine unit office. A nurse who had attended the funeral checked her over carefully and finally looked up with tears in her eyes. Despite the cold, the dehydration, the hours spent in the casket, she's going to be okay. It's a miracle, she whispered. Rex sat quietly beside the makeshift crib, his eyes never leaving the small bundle. The usual stiffness in his posture had melted away, replaced by a calm, protective presence no one had ever seen in him before. Officers passed by throughout the evening, shaking their heads in disbelief, some stopping just to sit beside him in silence. This wasn't just a rescue. It felt sacred. Amanda, Daniel's widow, arrived later that night, still clutching the letter tightly in her hand. She crouched down beside Rex, tears streaming freely down her face. He knew, she whispered. He knew she would need you. She reached out and gently stroked Rex's head. He leaned into her touch, his eyes soft, his body finally still. Amanda looked down at the puppy, her voice trembling. She'll grow up knowing who her father was. And she'll know the dog who saved her life. Bryant stood nearby, watching the scene unfold quietly. He never stopped protecting, he said softly. Even in death. The department made a unanimous decision. The puppy would stay with Amanda and Rex. She would grow up surrounded by love, with a living piece of her father watching over her every single day. And Rex, he hadn't just lost his partner. He had found his new purpose. He hadn't barked out of fear. He barked because life still remained. Because there was still something worth protecting. Because his mission wasn't over. If you were moved by this incredible story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true stories that remind us why loyalty, love, and courage matter more than anything else in this world.